Ethan stood on the balcony, staring at the sprawling city of Zavarius. The city was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Silver towers stretched into the sky. Colorful lights from alien technology bathed the streets in soft glows. It was quiet, peaceful, and strangely beautiful. But there was something in the air that made him uneasy. He wasn't supposed to be here, after all. He was a soldier, not a diplomat. The mission was simple: assist the Vishari Empire with their peacekeeping efforts and learn about their ways. But standing here on their planet, Ethan couldn't help but feel like an outsider. He wasn't just in an alien world, he was surrounded by a culture that was so different from his own, and it made him feel small, insignificant. He was brought here by the humans who had recently established a peaceful relationship with the Vishari. But peace could be fragile. His job was to make sure it stayed that way. His boots clacked against the stone as he turned away from the balcony. The peace talks had been long and uneventful. And now he was free to explore the capital for a bit before the next scheduled meeting, as he made his way through the palace hallways. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The Vishari were a mysterious species, beautiful and imposing. Their skin shimmered like glass, and their eyes were deep, reflecting the stars as if they held the secrets of the universe. Their empire was ancient, and their people seemed to move with grace and purpose, but Ethan had never truly understood them. He was just here to observe, to make sure everything went smoothly. It wasn't long before he found himself standing in front of a grand door, ornate with strange symbols he couldn't read. He hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open. The room inside was filled with light, bright and welcoming. It was a large hall lined with statues of ancient Vishari rulers, but it wasn't the room that caught his attention. It was her. Standing by the center of the room, surrounded by attendants, was the Vishari princess, Arya. She had been the subject of countless rumors among the human diplomats. Some said she was a brilliant leader. Others claimed she was as dangerous as she was beautiful, but Ethan hadn't paid much attention to those rumors. He was here on a mission, not to get involved in the politics of an alien empire. Princess Arya was everything the rumors said her presence was: commanding, yet graceful. She had long dark hair that cascaded down her back, and her eyes, like all Vishari, were a deep shimmering silver. But what caught Ethan off guard was the way she looked at him, as if in a sea of people her gaze had fixed on him alone. He froze, unsure of what to do. He wasn't a stranger to attention, but the way her gaze held his was different. There was something in her eyes, something unspoken yet familiar. Then she smiled. It was soft at first, just a small twitch of her lips, but the warmth in her smile was undeniable. Ethan's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment he couldn't understand why. Why was she smiling at him? He had never seen her before, and she was a princess. He was just a soldier. He didn't belong here, not in her world. Ethan swallowed, trying to shake the strange feeling that had settled in his chest. He turned to leave, but before he could take a step, he heard her voice. "Human soldier, you've come to observe our ways." Her voice was calm, but there was something about it that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned back around to see that she was looking directly at him, her smile still there. Yes," Ethan stammered, unsure of how to respond. "Just here to help with the peace talks." She nodded, as if she understood completely, and then, with an elegance that seemed to defy gravity, she moved toward him. Her attendants parted like the sea before her, and as she walked, Ethan could swear the room seemed to grow quieter, the air heavier. "You'll find that peace is not always as simple as words." "Shh," she said softly, stopping just a few feet away from him. Her silver eyes gleamed. "Sometimes it takes understanding, and sometimes... it takes a smile." Ethan blinked, confused. "A smile." She smiled again, this time more knowingly. "Yes, a smile. A simple gesture, but it carries meaning here. Perhaps... it is the beginning of understanding." Before he could reply, she turned and began to walk away, leaving Ethan standing there, feeling more uncertain than ever. What did she mean by that? He didn't know. He only knew that her smile had made him feel something he couldn't quite place, as he stood there in the empty hall. Staring at the spot where she had just been, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning. That somehow, in the simple act of a smile, his life had changed. And somehow, the princess, this stranger, had already become a part of it. The next day, Ethan found himself walking through the grand halls of the Vishari Palace. The memories of Princess Arya's smile lingered in his mind, but he had pushed it aside for the time being. He was a soldier, and his focus needed to stay on the peace talks, yet there was something about her smile that he couldn't shake. It felt like it meant more, like it held a secret he wasn't yet meant to understand. As he walked through the palace, a servant approached him with a formal message. The servant handed him an ornate scroll, sealed with the royal emblem. Ethan took it, carefully unrolling it to read its contents. The words were elegant and precise. "You are invited to a private audience with Princess Arya. Your presence is requested at the royal banquet this evening. It is an honor to have you here, human soldier." Ethan frowned. A private audience? With the princess? He wasn't sure if he was honored or nervous. This felt different from the standard meetings he had attended in the past. He had spent most of his life around soldiers and diplomats, not royalty. But this was a part of the mission, and he couldn't refuse. With a sigh, he nodded to the servant. "Tell the princess I'll be there," he said, his voice a little uncertain. The servant bowed and left quickly, leaving Ethan standing alone with the scroll in his hands. What was the princess thinking? Was it just curiosity that led her to invite him, or was there something more? His mind raced with questions he had no answers to. That evening, Ethan arrived at the banquet hall. The room was grander than anything he had ever seen. Tall pillars stretched up to the high ceiling, and the walls were covered in intricate designs and glowing patterns. The floor beneath his boots was made of smooth marble. Soft music played in the background, adding to the ethereal atmosphere. The air was filled with an unfamiliar but pleasant fragrance. Ethan's heart beat a little faster as he stepped inside. He didn't belong here. This was a place for dignitaries, for leaders, not for soldiers like him. But he had a job to do, and this banquet was a part of that. As he entered, he noticed the Vishari were already gathered, speaking in soft tones to one another. They were tall, elegant, and carried themselves with a certain quiet strength. Their clothing shimmered with metallic fabrics that changed color in the light, and their eyes gleamed with intelligence. Ethan couldn't help but feel a little out of place. He stood near the entrance, trying to blend in. He wasn't sure where to go or who to talk to. He spotted a few other humans standing to the side, but none of them seemed to be paying attention to him. His eyes drifted across the room until they landed on her. Princess Arya stood near the center of the room, surrounded by her attendants. She was even more beautiful in person than he had imagined, her presence undeniable. Her hair, dark as night, flowed down her back in soft waves, and her silver eyes glimmered with curiosity as she spoke with the other guests, as if sensing his gaze. She turned her head, and their eyes met once again. Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. There it was again, her smile. It was warm and welcoming, but it was also knowing, so she was aware of something he wasn't. Her lips curved slightly, and she nodded in his direction, signaling for him to approach. Ethan didn't know why, but he felt an urge to go to her. He walked across the room, trying to ignore the many eyes that seemed to follow him. When he reached her side, Arya greeted him with the same calm smile. "Human soldier," she said softly, her voice as gentle as it had been the day before. "I'm glad you could join us tonight." "Thank you, Your Highness," Ethan replied, bowing slightly, though it felt awkward. "It's an honor to be here." Arya gave a small nod, but her smile never faltered. "Please, sit," she said, gesturing to a chair beside her. "I wanted to speak with you in private. There's much I'd like to ask you." Ethan was taken aback by her words. A private conversation with the princess? What could she want with him? He hesitated for a moment, but then took the seat she offered. Her attendants stepped back, giving them space. "I must admit," Arya began, her tone thoughtful, "that I find you interesting. You're different from the soldiers I've met before." Ethan raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. "Different how?" Arya glanced around as if making sure no one else was listening. You carry yourself with strength, yet I sense something in you, something deeper. You're not just a soldier. There's more to you. I can see it in your eyes. Ethan was speechless for a moment. He had always been taught to keep his emotions in check, to never let anyone see the doubts he carried inside. But here with Arya, it felt like she could see, right through him. For the first time, he felt like someone truly understood him, even if it was just through a few words. Before he could speak, she smiled again, the same knowing smile that seemed to have started this whole strange series of events. You don't have to answer me now, she said softly. No, but I have a feeling that our paths are meant to cross in ways neither of us can predict. Ethan didn't know what to say. He had no idea what Arya meant by that, but the weight of her words hung in the air between them, leaving him with more questions than answers. As the banquet continued around them, he realized that this was only the beginning of something far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The princess, with her mysterious smile, had already started to change his world, and he didn't know where it would lead. Days passed, and Ethan found himself spending more time at the Vishari Palace. He had come to understand the peaceful intentions behind his mission. But it was hard to ignore the strange connection he felt with Princess Arya. Every time they crossed paths, her smile was the same calm, knowing, and somehow comforting. It was as if she understood something he did. One evening, after a long day of discussions and meetings, Ethan was walking through the garden when he saw her again. Princess Arya was standing by a fountain, her back to him, gazing at the water that shimmered under the soft light of the twin moons. There was something serene about her posture, as if she was lost in thought. Ethan hesitated, unsure whether he should approach her, but something inside him told him that he should. "Princess," he said, his voice low but clear. Arya turned. Slowly, and as their eyes met, she smiled that same knowing smile. "I'm glad you found me," she said softly. "I wanted to speak with you away from the others." Ethan nodded, stepping closer. He had grown used to the formalities of the palace, but there was something about these private moments with Arya that made him feel like he was seeing the true person behind the royal title. The princess wasn't just a leader, she was a woman, with her own thoughts and feelings, something Ethan had come to appreciate. "What did you want to talk about?" Ethan asked, a little uncertain. She motioned for him to sit beside her on a nearby stone bench. "There's something I've been meaning to share with you. I think it's time you knew." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Knew what?" Arya hesitated. For a moment, her gaze turning to the fountain again. "You see, there's a prophecy," she said quietly, "a very old one. It speaks of a time when a human and a Vishari leader will join forces. Their bond will be the key to saving both. Our people." Ethan blinked, confused. "A prophecy. Are you telling me that? ... I'm part of some ancient plan?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't want to tell you at first. It felt strange, and I wasn't sure you would believe it. But now, after everything we've shared, I think you need to know." Ethan leaned forward, trying to make sense of her words. "So, this prophecy, it involves me?" Arya met his gaze, her silver eyes filled with an intensity that made Ethan's heart race. "Yes. You were chosen long ago, even before you stepped foot on this planet. Your presence here is no coincidence. It's part of something much bigger than either of us." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. Chosen? He was just a soldier, a simple human sent on a peace mission. How could he possibly be part of some ancient prophecy? "I don't understand," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not anything special. I don't have any special powers. I'm just trying to do my job." Arya's expression softened. She reached out and placed her hand on his. "That's the thing, Ethan. You don't need powers or a title. You already have everything you need. You have the strength inside you, the ability to lead and protect, even without realizing it." Ethan's mind raced. "But how can I help? I'm just a soldier. I'm not prepared for something like this." Arya smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "That's where the prophecy is different. It's not about being prepared. It's about who you are inside. The connection between us isn't about what we know or how strong we are. It's about trust. It's about forming a bond that can bring peace." Ethan felt a strange warmth spread through him as he listened to her words. Despite his doubts and confusion, was something about her presence that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, this was all meant to happen. He didn't fully understand how or why, but the feeling in his chest told him that Arya wasn't lying. She believed in the prophecy, and somehow, she believed in him too. "I don't know if I can live up to this prophecy," he said quietly, looking down at their hands. "But I'll try. For you, for the Vishari, and for the humans back home." Arya nodded, her grip on his hand tightening slightly. "That's all I ask, Ethan. We don't need perfection. We just need trust. And you've already earned that." For a moment, the two of them sat in silence, the only sound being the soft trickle of water from the fountain. Ethan was overwhelmed by everything that had happened in such a short time. He had come here thinking he was just another soldier, another cog in the wheel of diplomacy. But now, he realized that his life had been shaped by something far greater than he had ever imagined. As the evening sky darkened, the stars above them shone brightly. Ethan could feel the weight of the moment. It was as if everything had led to this, the smile, the conversation, the prophecy. He couldn't explain it, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had already changed, and he would never be the same again. Arya stood and turned to face him, her eyes soft. "Tomorrow will be another step toward fulfilling this bond, Ethan. Are you ready?" He stood up beside her, meeting her gaze with a new sense of purpose. "I don't know what the future holds, Princess, but I'm ready to face it with you." Arya smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and determination. "Then, together, we will build a new future." As the two of them stood side by side, looking out at the galaxy above, Ethan realized that he wasn't just part of a prophecy. He was part of something that could change the fate of two worlds forever. And with Arya by his side, maybe they could make it happen. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Tensions between the Vishari and the neighboring star systems had been growing for months, and the peace talks were only a temporary solution. But Ethan could sense that something was brewing. Beneath the surface, an unknown threat that none of them could yet name, Princess Arya was busier than ever. Her days filled with meetings and strategy sessions. It was clear that the weight of her responsibility was taking its toll on her, but she never showed it. She remained as calm and composed as always, her silver eyes gleaming with purpose. But Ethan could see the subtle signs of stress, how her hands trembled when she wasn't paying attention, or how she seemed to zone out during long discussions. Ethan, too, had been kept busy with his own tasks. He was part of a small human team assigned to train the Vishari guards, ensuring they were ready to defend their planet should the need arise. His military experience was invaluable, but he felt a growing sense of unease. The soldiers under his command were skilled, but they lacked the raw instinct that Ethan had developed over the years. Still, he kept his focus, knowing that the threat was coming, whether they were ready or not. One evening, as he was finishing up his training session, he was summoned to the royal chambers. The palace was unusually quiet that night, the usual hum of activity replaced by a tense silence that seemed to hang in the air. Ethan made his way through the corridors, his boots echoing softly on the marble floor. When he entered the royal chambers, Arya was waiting for him. She was dressed in a simple, yet elegant gown, her long hair pulled back into a loose braid. Despite the simplicity of her attire, she still looked like a queen, a woman of immense power and grace. Her eyes, the usual calm, was replaced by a sharpness, a look of determination. "Ethan," she said, her voice firm yet warm, "we need to talk." Ethan nodded, his heart picking up pace. "What's going on?" "You look ... concerned." She sighed and gestured for him to sit. "I've just received word from the council. The neighboring star system, the Zarathians, have mobilized their fleet. They claim it's a show of strength, but we know better. It's an act of aggression." Ethan's stomach dropped. The Zarathians were known for their brutal tactics, and if they were really moving in, this could mean war. "What do they want?" "They want control of the mining colonies on the Outer Rim," Arya explained. "Our people have had peaceful trade agreements with them for years, but they've become greedy. They're demanding access to resources that don't belong to them. And now, they're using force to get what they want. Ethan clenched his fists. Are you ready to fight? Arya nodded slowly. We will fight if we must. I need you by my side, Ethan. This isn't just about soldiers and weapons. It's about protecting our way of life. We have something to lose here, something that can't be replaced. He met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She was a leader, and her people relied on her, but she was still human just like him. She had fears and insecurities, and in that moment, Ethan realized how much weight she carried every day. I'm with you, he said, his voice steady. Whatever happens, I'll fight by your side. Arya smiled. A small, grateful smile. Thank you, Ethan. I knew I could count on you. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. The quiet was broken only by the distant sounds of the palace footsteps, voices, the occasional murmur of conversation. But Ethan couldn't ignore the sense of impending doom that hung in the air. This wasn't just a battle for resources. It was a battle for their very survival. We don't have much time, Arya said, standing and walking to the large window that overlooked the city. The Zarathians will be here within a few days. We need to prepare for battle. But we also need to know what they're planning. If we can learn their strategy, we might be able to stop them before it gets worse. Ethan stood, walking over to her side. What do you need me to do? She turned to face him, her expression hardening with determination. I need you to lead a small team, get to their fleet, infiltrate their command ship, and gather any intelligence you can. We need to know their weaknesses, their plans. And if we're lucky, we can turn the tide before it's too late. Ethan's heart raced. He had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for the future of two worlds. I'll do it, he said, without hesitation. Can't let them destroy everything. Arya placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch light but firm. I knew you would. You're more than just a soldier, Ethan. You're the key to this war. Words hit him harder than he expected. He'd never thought of himself as anything more than a simple soldier, just a man with a mission. But here, with Arya, he felt like something more. He felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. We'll stop them, Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve. I won't let you down. Arya nodded, her eyes gleaming with confidence. I know you won't. As they prepared to face the coming storm, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The Zarathian fleet was on the move, and there was no turning back. But Ethan wasn't afraid. He had Arya by his side, and together, they would face whatever came their way. The war was about to begin, and they would be ready. The night before their mission, Ethan lay awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced with thoughts of the coming battle. The Zarathian fleet was nearing, and the pressure of their mission weighed heavily on him. He had trained soldiers before, but infiltrating an enemy fleet to gather intelligence was different. This wasn't just about strategy or weapons, it was about survival, the future of both the Vashari and humanity. He thought about Arya, the princess who had seemed so distant when he first met her, and now felt like someone he could trust completely. She had opened up to him about the prophecy, about how they were linked in ways neither of them fully understood. At first, Ethan had dismissed it as ancient legend, but the more time he spent with her, the more he realized there was something real about the bond they shared. Something that went beyond the prophecy, a deep, unspoken connection. Suddenly, there was a soft knock at the door. Ethan. Arya's voice was faint but clear. Ethan sat up quickly, his heart pounding. Come in, he called, standing up as the door opened. Arya stepped inside, her expression serious but soft. She was still dressed in her royal gown, though it was now clear she had taken time to prepare for the mission ahead. Her silver eyes met his, and for a moment they both stood in silence. Ethan could see the worry in her eyes, but there was also something else, something familiar. It was the same look she had given him when they first met, but now it held more weight. Ethan, she began, her voice steady, but with a touch of emotion. Before we go into this, I need to tell you something important. Ethan nodded, feeling the gravity of her words. What is it? Arya took a deep breath, and then she spoke. The prophecy, ... It's not just about us. It's about the future. Our future and the future of our people. What we do tomorrow will affect not just the Vishari, but the entire galaxy. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He had suspected there was more to the prophecy than Arya had told him, but hearing her speak about it in such serious terms made it feel real. I don't understand, he admitted. How can we be the ones to change everything? Arya walked toward him, her steps slow and deliberate. The prophecy speaks of a great change, but it also warns of great danger. There is a power we both possess, a power we have yet to fully understand. It's not about our physical strength or our weapons. It's about our ability to unite our people, to lead them with trust and compassion. Ethan looked down, feeling conflicted. He was a soldier, not a leader. His whole life had been about following orders, not making decisions. He wasn't ready to carry such a heavy burden, especially not for the fate of two worlds. You're asking too much of me, he said quietly, his voice thick with uncertainty. I'm just one man. I can't do all of this alone. Arya reached out and touched his arm gently, her silver eyes softening with understanding. You're not alone. We're in this together. We always have been. Her words hit him harder than he expected. There was truth in them, something undeniable. He wasn't just fighting for a cause, he was fighting for her. And somehow, that made everything feel different. He could feel the weight of the prophecy of the future they both carried, but with Arya by his side. He started to believe that maybe they could do it together. I'm not sure what this power is that you're talking about, said, his voice firming with resolve, but I'll stand by you. I'll fight for you, for the Vishari, for all of us. Arya smiled, her expression filled with gratitude. That's all I ask. Tomorrow we take the first step toward fulfilling our destiny. But no matter what happens, know that you've already done something incredible. You've made a difference. Ethan. Ethan looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he felt truly connected to her. It wasn't just the smile or the bond they shared. It was the trust, the understanding that had grown between them. He wasn't just a soldier in a foreign land. He was part of something bigger, part of a team, part of a prophecy, and most importantly, part of Arya's future. The next morning, Ethan met Arya in the courtyard. The preparations for their mission were underway. They were going to infiltrate the Zarathian fleet, gather intelligence, and return with the information. They needed to stop the invasion. It wasn't going to be easy, and they knew the risks. But they were determined. Ethan was dressed in his combat gear, his weapons at the ready. Arya stood beside him, her expression calm and focused, as always. But Ethan could see the underlying tension in her posture. She was carrying the weight of her people, and he could feel the burden she bore. But in that moment, he also saw the strength in her strength that matched his own. Are you ready? Arya asked, her voice steady, but with a hint of nerves. Ethan nodded, his determination clear. I'm ready, and I'm with you, always. She smiled, the same smile that had started it all. The smile that had opened the door to this incredible journey. Then let's go. They turned and walked toward the waiting ships, knowing that the future of the Vishari and of all humanity rested in their hands. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and unknowns. But one thing was certain. They would face it together. Whatever happened, they would never be alone. As the ships prepared for launch, Ethan looked at Arya one last time. There was something about her that made him believe in the impossible. The future was uncertain, but with her by his side, he felt ready for whatever came next. The journey to the Zarathian fleet was long and tense. Ethan sat quietly in the back of the transport ship, his eyes fixed on the starry expanse outside the window. The silence inside the ship was heavy, filled with thoughts of what lay ahead. He had been in many dangerous situations before, but this felt different. This time, he wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting for the future of two worlds. A future that was somehow intertwined with Princess Arya. Arya sat beside him, her posture as calm as always. She was staring out the window, too, her silver eyes reflecting the stars, deep in thought. He wanted to say something, to break the silence, but he wasn't sure what to say. The weight of the mission hung over them both. They were about to infiltrate an enemy fleet, gather intelligence, and return with the information that could change the course of the war. It was a dangerous plan, but it was the only chance they had to stop the Zarathians. After a few minutes, Arya turned to him, her expression serious. "Ethan, I know this isn't easy, but we have to trust each other. We're in this together." Looked at her, meeting her gaze. He could see the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had drawn him to her in the first place. She wasn't just a princess. She was a letterer woman, willing to risk everything for her people. "Trust you, Arya," Ethan said quietly. "I may not fully understand everything that's happening, but I trust you." She smiled softly, the warmth in her expression easing the tension in the air. "That's all I need to hear." The transport ship rumbled as it entered the atmosphere of the Zarathian fleet. The time for words was over. They were about to face the unknown. There was no turning back. The mission was clear. They would sneak aboard the Zarathian command ship, gather information about their plans, and return undetected. It was a risky plan, but it was their best shot. Ethan had trained for this kind of mission, but the stakes were higher now. They weren't just risking their own lives, they were risking the future of two empires. As the ship docked with the Zarathian vessel, Ethan could feel the tension building. They had prepared for this moment for days, but there was always that small voice of doubt in the back of his mind. What if they were caught? What if the Zarathians discovered their plan? Arya, sensing his unease, placed a hand on his arm.
We'll
"Be fine. We've come this far together. Now we just have to finish it." Ethan nodded, grateful for her support. He had no choice but to believe in her and in the bond they shared. He knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The doors to the transport ship opened, and they stepped out onto the cold metal surface of the Zarathian command ship. The air was thick with tension, and every step they took felt like a step closer to the unknown. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the quiet halls of the ship. Arya led the way, her movements graceful and confident. Ethan followed. Closely behind, scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger, they reached the command center without incident. Arya quickly disabled the security system, allowing them to slip inside undetected. The room was filled with Zarathian officers, their backs turned as they focused on their screens. Ethan and Arya crept through the shadows, careful not to make a sound. Ethan's heart raced as he scanned the data on the Zarathians' monitors. He found the files they were looking for, plans for a full-scale invasion of Vashari space. The information confirmed what they had feared. The Zarathians weren't just after resources. They were preparing for war. "We have what we need," Arya whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded. But before they could leave, a sharp noise echoed through the room. One of the officers turned around, his eyes locking onto Ethan and Arya. For a split second, time seemed to stop. Ethan's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon. But Arya stepped forward, her voice calm and commanding. "We were sent to deliver a message," Arya said in fluent Zarathian, her voice smooth and confident. "The Vashari are aware of your plans. You can still avoid war. Call off the invasion, and we can negotiate." The officer narrowed his eyes, clearly unconvinced. But Arya didn't back down. She stood tall, her presence commanding. Ethan couldn't help but admire her confidence. He had never seen her this powerful, this determined. After a tense moment, the officer spoke. "We will consider your message. But know this, Princess. Your people will not be spared." With that, he turned away, signaling for his officers to continue their work. Arya didn't wait for a second invitation. She grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him back toward the exit. "Let's go," she said urgently. They hurried down the hallway, the sound of footsteps echoing louder as they neared the transport ship. They were almost there when the alarms went off. Breach detected. The ship's systems blared. Ethan's heart raced. They had been discovered. Arya didn't hesitate. She pressed a button on her communicator, and the transport ship's hatch opened, ready for them to board. The two of them ran for their lives, the sounds of pursuit growing louder with every step, just as they reached the transport ship. A group of Zarathian soldiers appeared at the end of the hallway. Ethan and Arya didn't look back. They dove into the ship, sealing the doors behind them. As the transport ship lifted off, Ethan looked over at Arya. Her expression was determined, but there was a trace of exhaustion in her eyes. She had pushed herself to the limit, and so had he. But together, they had done it. They had gathered the information they needed. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice filled with relief. Arya nodded, a small, tired smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "For now, yes. But this is just the beginning." As the transport ship made its way back to the Vishari homeworld, Ethan and Arya shared a quiet moment of understanding. They had faced danger together, and they had survived. But there was still much to do. The battle for peace was far from over, and the future of both their people rested in their hands. Together, they would face whatever came next. And whatever happened, they would not face it alone.